And we are back with our experts. We have some breaking news that we're going to get into on the Mar-a-Lago trial. But first, I want to get both of our experts here on what we just went through, which was a Supreme Court case. David Kelly and Jason Johnson. We've got new filings because there's so much going on Florida Mar-a-Lago. So I'm going to get that to you in a second, David. Basically, both sides putting forward their proposed trial dates. But given this is the first time hearing from both of you on the other big case, the Supreme Court case, I wanted to get your reaction first, David, on this slow timeline.
Well, look, as always, you make a very compelling case when you lay out all the evidence to suggest that the Supreme Court is playing a little bit of a game here. But let me throw maybe some counter arguments to that, which, number one, for example, in the Colorado case and in the Bush v. Gore case, you had real deadlines external to the case, meaning that in Colorado case, it means, when do states get the ballots done and when do they get them out? They have a hard deadline external to the case. Bush v. Gore, they had to get somebody in president or in the president's office. In this case, what you have is really a desire by the government to proceed at a certain time when there's no legal requirement to do that. You got plenty of time running on the speedy trial clock. So I don't know that there is any deadline other than kind of a preference. And the reality is, look,
well,
no matter
I'll let you finish. But Jack Smith's folks would argue, David, that you have a tradition of at least no political themed action of 60 days. You have practical realities, and it's not that the case has to be done by the election because of some political reason, of course, that would be untoward, but rather it's a case about whether this criminal defendant stole an election. So there is a great interest in the United States government to protect elections. Go ahead.
Right. I think they get enmeshed in that. The Supreme Court then kind of blatantly engages in politics, right? And no matter how they decide the case here, how they decide to proceed, either they go with Smith or they go with Trump. There's no winning for them here, right? Because if they went with Jack Smith, then everybody claims that he's playing politics and kind of putting this thumb on the scale of the government. And if they do it the way they've done it, people claim they put it on their thumb on the scale for Trump. So I don't know that there's any real way out for them here without getting the type of criticism they're getting. So we'll see.
Well, I'll go back and forth with you. But David, you're using shorthand of saying who they go with. All Donald Trump cares about is avoiding this trial by the election. If they do something that does that, then they've gone with Trump. As I said to viewers moments ago, and I'm happy to hear any counter argument. What's the legal value, David, of a precedent that says you can put him on trial, but we won't let you?
Yeah. So again, I think, look, I'm just trying to throw some arguments out there. It's not that I disagree with it. It's compelling arguments that you've presented. But on the other side of it, I do think that in those other cases you've cited, there is kind of an external non-case issue that kind of drives the decision as opposed to when this needs to be tried. And the points you raise are really, again, more political issues than they are kind of hard and fast rules that need to be addressed in kind of an expedited basis. So that's my view on that. Look, I was disappointed because, frankly, I think the immunity issue is a layup, right? And I think the D.C. Circuit Court wrote an extremely compelling, comprehensive opinion that I can't see the Supreme Court overturning. That having been said, the Supreme Court now is couching the issue in a much different way than either the D.C. Circuit Court did or any of the parties did, which is whether or not there is immunity for conduct alleged to involve official acts. And what concerns me about that is whether or not the Supreme Court ultimately kicks it back, not with really a final decision so much as a direction to the district court to make findings in advance as to whether or not the acts for which he's being prosecuted involved official acts. But all's told, again, I think these are all issues that could be dealt with post-conviction on direct appeal.
Right.
So
You're reminding everyone.
As Judge Ludwig said, I agree with Judge Liddy. I'm surprised that they even took this case.
They didn't need to take it. Well, legally, they didn't need to take it. I've heard it.
They didn't need to take the case.
Yeah, and I've heard it said in public, oh, well, big case, the Supreme Court eventually has to weigh in on it. Sure, but not before a trial. Jason, I'll remind people there was a Republican governor who was convicted, and some of the ways that the prosecution went at him were deemed ultimately questionable. Fine. Supreme Court dealt with that after. He was not incarcerated before the Supreme Court process. This is way early to delay it. And so, Jason, I turn to you. Our lonely nation turns to you, not because you've practiced law as long as David Kelly or prosecuted as many tough cases as David Kelly or run the Southern District of New York like David Kelly, who, as I remind people, is my former boss. But, Jason, because I wonder whether the Supreme Court is acting in a way that will ultimately be deemed by the evidence to look more partisan than legal. And what are your political thoughts on that?
It's absolute partisan. This is garbage. And honestly, Ari, I think the public at large and Democrats in the White House and, frankly, Elena Kagan and Ketanji Brown Jackson and Sonia Sotomayor should be standing up and screaming right now. This is an absolute disgusting abuse of power. And let me make this clear for the non-lawyers out there, because I'm the non-lawyer who's here. I'm explaining this. I'm on campus right now. I was explaining this case to my students today, and they're literally saying, well, why is this taking so long? This isn't that complicated. I literally had to show them a video from Lethal Weapon 2 about diplomatic immunity to explain how silly presidential immunity is. This is not complicated. It is very clear that we have an absolutely corrupted Supreme Court, that at least 3 of the justices have financial dealings that we can't explain. Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Clarence Thomas. And rather than the court demonstrating that the only audience that matters is the American people, they have shown that the only audience that matters is Republicans. That is the problem with this. It's not complicated. It doesn't require a lot of legalese. They are stalling in order to allow Donald Trump to get into the White House, or at least have a chance to get into the White House. And given the fact that a third of the court was put into office and put into their positions by him, it's not that hard to tell. So, Ari, the concern that I have, frankly, is not what's going to happen legally, but the fact that we have a government that has taken so much time to hold this man accountable that he may never see the jail. This is as real as it gets. He may never see jail. And it's going to be because we can't trust our Supreme Court, and Merrick Garland didn't do his job.
So that's on the politics. Then, David, my control room and I, my producers and I, we were talking just as we were going into this convo that we just got this proposed schedule in the other case. So I want to keep both of you going into this other related case news, Jack Smith's Mar-a-Lago documents case. They want now, on the DOJ side, a July 8th trial date. Now, Trump, his side, proposing an August 12th date. This is new tonight. That would still be, interestingly, before the presidential election. That trial was originally slated for late May. So, David, I know you are getting this as we are because this just crossed from federal PACER, and these are the filings. So, again, DOJ saying let's start the Mar-a-Lago documents case in July. Trump saying August. Your reaction?
Well, my first reaction is I was thinking last night when this ruling came out from the Supreme Court that if I'm Jack Smith, I try to get this trials, not the documents case scheduled, but the election case scheduled for the first business day after July 4th, because you'll know you will have a ruling on the immunity issue by then. You can't have one defendant on trial in 2 courtrooms at the same time. So I'm a little bit surprised that they did this. It's also interesting, too, because I think what this tells us that the Trump camp probably sees being on trial in the documents case as good for his campaign. Because instead of trying to delay it as they have in the past the election, they're saying bring it on now, and they can basically run on this. If he gets convicted, he can, he thinks he can probably pardon himself, but he thinks it's probably a good opportunity to get free campaign, free airtime, and, get his base all stirred up right on the eve of the election. So, not a surprise.
And David, with that said, let me jump in and ask, so when Trump says, okay, August, which is new now tonight, we've heard a lot of talk here just in the last day about them ducking, delaying, avoiding a trial. If this is what's coming down the pike, obviously the difference here on paper would seem to be thin. Okay, it's a couple weeks apart, Jack Smith and Trump, but does this mean that we are very likely to see the docs case then begin before the fall, or could the judge still do other things?
The judge still could do other things. It's going to be, I think with this particular judge, it's been pretty hard to predict where she comes out. My guess is there's probably a lot more people betting that she goes with the Trump proposed date than with the Smith proposed date. It's going to depend on her calendar. But again, what surprises me most about this is that what it tells us, I think, is Jack Smith is saying there ain't no way I'm getting to this election case before the election.
Fascinating. And again, it's been a flurry of filings because this leading candidate for the Republican nomination is also a defendant in several different jurisdictions. David, I'm going to tell you this, and I'm not just saying this because of our history. We appreciate your arguments and your counter arguments.
Well, it's always
Jason,
good
good to see you
air them
too,
out.
sir.
Anytime.
There we go. We're the wiser for it, we hope. Jason and David, my special thanks. You're juggling a lot.